Good evening, guys. This is the last video on setting up a sprite sheet out of something we've rendered out of Blender and then using GIMP and Texture Packer to compile a sprite sheet. And we should have all of these sprite sheets here, but one other thing we're going to need is our Quell engine in a resting position. And so I'm just going to copy and paste this. I'm going to rename it rest. Okay, so we have it down here with our sprite sheets. We're going to open up Unity. Unity now has a Unity hub. If you're working with several versions of Unity, the Unity hub will help you work with that, but we are going to, I don't think I still have this project. That is true. Okay. Okay, so we're going to create a new project, and we're going to, we'll just call it Quell again. We're going to set up a 2D template, and that's what we're working with here, 2D sprites. We're not going to import any asset packages at this time. So we're going to create the project, and this will take just a minute to get started up. So while this is starting, I'll just say I just installed the 2019 version. There seem to be a few differences in what we're doing this evening than you may experience in the 2018 version, the last version. So I apologize for any differences, but this will be pretty close to the same. And where I know that there may be differences, I will try to point them out. So we start out here in our blank scene. We're going to create a new folder. We're going to call this our Quell engine. That's going to encapsulate all of our asset items. And we're going to create a new folder in here. We're going to call this our sprites. And in here, you can either drag or drop these in. I'll just do that here. You can just drag and drop those in. Another option is to right click and import new assets and select them that way. But now that we have these in, you'll see the images that are rendered out of the sprite, and these aren't divided up like we want them. Now the rest is okay, but we're going to do some resizing on that one as well in just a little bit, but we really need to break these up. And so if you select this in the inspector over here, it may be different for 2018 version. I want to say it was set at default and I had to change it to here, but now in 2019 it seems to know that we're working with sprite images here, so this may have to be set in earlier versions, but we are going to have to change this to multiple. And whenever you click Sprite Editor, it's going to ask you to apply those changes, which is fine. And then we're going to go in. For us, for this project, the automatic slicing works fine. If you're working of things that are a little different, I think the recommended method is grid by cell size, but we're just going to do automatic here. And this is going to be make a nice slice for us all across the board. I've tested this a couple of times, but notice width and height here is 383. Okay, so we have this one, and now if we expand it, we have our individual images that are rendered out of that sprite sheet. Okay, same for here. We're going to click, change this to multiple, apply this, slice, and apply, and again 383 here. Okay, and same for this one. Okay, so you've noticed all of these are 383 by 383. If we go in here and click on this, again we see it here, but this rest image is slightly bigger. It's got a little more transparent meat around the edge. So 409, 409. I'm just going to easy fix this and change it to multiple and let the sprite editor slice it as it did the others. We probably wouldn't have to worry about that if we were using the cell by grid size, but since we are doing it this way, I just want it all to be the same grid, all to be the same image size. Okay, so that gets us down to 383 by 383. Okay, so now we have all of our sprite sheets imported and set up. The next step is we're going to create animations out of these sprite sheets, and so we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call that animations, and in here we're going to create an empty object. This is going to be our actual Quell engine object. Oops, not what I meant to do. Wanted to rename this. Okay, and then in our animations folder, we're going to create an animation. We're going to name this the rest Quell engine animation. We're going to also have a spin up animation. We're going to have a spinning animation. And then finally, we're going to have a spin down animation, and that's where it's slowing down before it comes to a rest. Okay, so with these four animations, we're going to get the animation at a resting position, then spinning up as it speeds up, and then it's spinning state. And then if someone releases a key that causes a Quell engine to stop running, it's going to spin down and then come back to a rest. But right now we need to set these up, and so we're going to just take all of these animations and we're going to assign them to the Quell engine object. And whenever you do this, you'll notice that it creates a Quell engine animator controller, and this is what allows us to set up the transitions between the various animations in gameplay. And so we'll look at that a little bit later after we get the animation set up. So now we need to define the animation. So click on your Quell engine object, click on this animation tab. If you don't have this animation tab open, just click on window, and I can never find it whenever I'm looking for it. Animation. And clicking on that will add it for you. Drag it out here so you can see your frames. And if you notice here, we have our different animations here we can select. So we're going to start with the rest, and we're going to go over here to the sprite, and we're going to drag this frame inside and set this to 24. Doesn't really matter the frame rate on this one, but just so they're all the same frame rate. And if you expand this, you'll see the image that it's looking at. If you hit play here, you'll actually see it, what it looks like. Not doing much, but that's what we expect for rest. Okay, so we're going to switch over here to the spin down is next to there. So this is the one that goes from being bright to dark as it comes to a rest. So expand this and then shift click all of these sprites here and drag them in, and change your frame rate again to 24, and that will expand it out. You can view it. Looks good. And same for our spinning. shift click, drag these in, and change that to 24. And finally, our spin up procedure or animation, shift click, drag these all in, and change this to 24. Okay, so if you happen to accidentally place the wrong sprite collection in the incorrect animation, you can just right click and remove property, and then you can add it again, the proper one. And so there we go. Make sure your sample rate's still the same and it looks good. Okay, so that's all of our animations set up and ready to go. But now we need to work with them together so that the game knows how to piece them together and make a fluid overall animation. And we do this with the animator controller. So double click on that will bring us here. And I'm actually going to break this out so we can see it a little better. Okay, so we're not going to worry about our exit and any state. Those are special states that we're not going to be using here. Our entry point comes in and our default state is the rest. And I believe that's decided by what you set first in there. But you can make any of these your default state by right clicking and saying set as your default. But we want rest to be our default. And just think about how this is going to flow as you play through the game. So you're going to come in at a rest, and whenever you press a button, it's going to begin spinning up. And then whenever it reaches its full spin up state, it's going to start spinning. And then it's going to spin down whenever we release a button and then go back to a rest state. And so to just kind of follow that flow of logic of how we expect the animation to look, we can create these transitions just by clicking, right clicking and making a transition. And notice these are one-way flows. You can create a transition and bring it over here, but that's not what we want. Okay, and then also as we're playing, what if somebody released the button before it got to a full spinning state? So there's a transition here as well. And this kind of is our logic for how this works together. But we need a parameter, and we'll call this parameter. You click on the parameter tab over here, and plus we're going to add one here, and it's a Boolean parameter, and we're going to call it Quell engine on. Okay, so now we can control that with this checkbox. If it's checked, it's on or true. If it's unchecked, it's off or false. So at rest, if we have this selected, it's going to start spinning up, and then it reaches its fully spinned up state and it's fully spinning, and then we unselect this. It's going to go to a spin down and then go back to rest. Same thing, we have Quell engine on, and then we turn it off before it reaches this state. Then it's going to start spinning down and go back to rest. So having this here, this allows us to kind of test it as we're kind of demoing the level, I guess, or we can also access this through code, and this is how we will control our transition states. Okay, so now I'm going to bring this animator for now just back in here so we have it, and we're gonna look at these transitions here, and whenever you select it, notice in the inspector here down here at the bottom, the thing that kicks off the rest, the spin up process, this transition here, is somebody hit the Quell engine button. Maybe that's a space bar, whatever, we'll define that later. But whenever it goes on, that's what kicks this event off. Okay, and then as it goes on to here, this condition continues to be true. Now over here, if they remove the button before it reaches this state, well, this time the Quell engine is actually false, and so it turns off here. Again, here this will remain in a spinning state until they release a button. So this condition again is going to be false. And then here we can allow it to just go on its own by using this has exit time. And what that does is it uses the exit time of this spin down to force it into the rest position, or we could also assign this condition, but for just demonstrating, we'll just leave it as has exit time. Now now that we have this, we can actually kind of see what it looks like with our game here. Let's just play this. Okay. One thing, if you notice here it says no model is available for preview. Click back here on your layers, on your hierarchy, sorry, on this Quell engine object, and we don't have a sprite assigned for the sprite renderer. So we're going to assign this rest sprite here. And now if we go back to the animator, we look at the transitions, we can actually preview what this transition will look like, but if we hit play we can actually watch. And so notice here it's in this rest position, that's where the blue bar is. Now over here on our parameters we're going to turn the Quell engine on, and it went from here to our spinning state. Now we're going to look at why this only spun once and then it stopped. But now if we turn the Quell engine off, it goes to a spin down state and then goes back to rest. If we can turn it on and off again, it makes this little short triangle. So we need to look at why this is only spinning once. Let's look at this. So if you click on this, if you actually go to your spinning animation here, you'll notice you have this checkbox for loop time. Selecting that will now allow it to spin multiple times. So now let's look at what that looks like. Which is how we want it to look. And then whenever we release the button, okay. And that is pretty much the basics of working with sprites, sprite sheets, animations, and an animation controller in Unity. And this also the last of the videos on how to create a sprite sheet out of Blender. Appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, just feel free to ask, let me know, subscribe, and have a good night.